I'm standing there, and there's Bowie on one side and Michael Hutchence on the other. And I remember like standing, and we're all kind of, they were talking, and I'm standing, and I'm like, this is freak. I'm like, this can't be happening.
Hello and welcome to The World as It Should Be, a podcast in which we ask our guests to tell us what they would change to help create their perfect world.
By listening to what they'd like to change, we'll hear more about who they are, what they do, and what inspires them.
This podcast is brought to you by the team behind Prima Donna, a uniquely anarchic and joyous festival of everything creative.
My name is Shona Abianca, and I'm a book publicist working with some of the most thought-provoking authors writing today.
I'm Catherine Riley, a writer and director of the festival. We're delighted to be your guides on this podcast adventure. The World as It Should Be from Prima Donna. Gail Ann Dorsey was born in Philadelphia in the US and acquired her first bass guitar aged 14. After an early stint at film school, where she was the only woman in her first-year classes, she dedicated herself full-time to her career in music.
She has recorded and toured as a session musician with the great and the good of the music industry, including Tears for Fears, Boy George, Lenny Kravitz, The National, Ani DeFranco, Bryan Ferry, Gang of Four, and perhaps the most famous one, David Bowie. She sang and played bass in his band from 1995 to Bowie's death in 2016.
Gail Ann has also recorded as a solo artist, releasing 3 critically acclaimed albums, the most recent of which is titled I Used to Be. She now lives in New York, where she joins us from today. Hello, Gail, and welcome to The World as It Should Be.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, thank you for coming.
So we know you're currently in New York, Gail, but is there anywhere else right now you'd rather be?
Oh, I'd rather be in Paris. My partner is in Paris. In fact, I'll be leaving a week from today, actually.
Wouldn't we all rather be in Paris?
I mean, it's kind of not an ideal time to be kind of anywhere at this point.
Yeah.
But it'll be much nicer to be with the person I love, so that it'll be a little easier.
How long are you going to be in Paris for?
I should be there for, I'm going to try and stay for a good 3 months or so, maybe
Nice.
4.
Springtime in Paris.
Springtime in Paris.
I know.
Very romantic.
Yes, indeed.
So I'm going to actually cut the romance now because we're going to talk about the first thing that you would change. And it's the elimination of weapons. Getting rid of the ones we had. Not to say there wouldn't be disputes between people, you say, but we can find other ways to get our point across with our bare hands. Gun thing is insane. I guess you're talking about the US.
Yes.
And you grew up in Philadelphia. So what have you noticed about, you spent so much time in London. So what have you really noticed about the differences?
Well, when I first went to London, I thought it was so fantastic that the police didn't carry guns, that you weren't looking at guns on the sides of people's bodies as they walked around. There are a lot of places in the world, airports and places that have a lot of weapons. But I was just thinking in general, I was asked to do this program and then to think of things and I always thought that it's the murder thing here in the US in particular is just insane to just think that people can carry guns around and just, do what they do with them. And it was, I was thinking about this before, like a few weeks ago when I was asked to do this program. And then I guess it was 2 weeks already now that we had 2 mass shootings in 1 week, which was kind of ironic because I had thought about this before this happened. Obviously, there are a lot of shootings that happen in the United States and everywhere in the world, and wars and at all times. But we had these 2 horrible, horrific murder mass shootings in the U.S. just recently. So it was then fresh on my mind again. And I just thought, it's just too easy. And to me, in an ideal world, it would be great if we could somehow eliminate the weapons that exist and start again in a new way of trying to find a way of, airing our disputes and our differences of opinion, our irrational anger. People are always going to be confrontational, and other animals are are as well. They fight. It's just kind of seems to be in the nature of living creatures.
Yeah.
But I just feel like the whole thing with guns and the glorification of it and the idea that how easy it is to pick up a gun and and acquire a gun, it seems. I mean, I've never owned one. I don't think I ever will, but it just seems so easy to be able to do that. And I think
Yeah.
in an ideal world, it wouldn't be that easy.
Do you think there would ever be a successful gun amnesty?
I don't think there ever will be in the United States. I mean, even if they were able to ban these big like they have these machine guns and things that people use in wars, and even in armies, I don't think they're ever going to not have weapons. But it would be nice to to at least make the law. I think because there's no way you can take them back. Even if there was a law that you couldn't get them, people would get them. I mean, they always do. There's always someone who can supply what you need.
It's interesting from our perspective over here, and
Mhm,
obviously there are so many problems here that mirror what's going on in the US. But
mhm.
guns is not quite one of them right now, thankfully. But
No, no,
so it's
thankfully.
hard to understand the kind of the weddedness that Americans have to guns. This idea of like
Mhm,
the right to bear
mm,
arms and stuff like that,
yes.
and the fact you're right. Like I think there's a really bonkers stat that like there are 3 times as many guns as people in the US. And so
Yeah,
they accumulate, don't they? They
they
never
do, and they've got
go
this.
anywhere.
It's a sport. It's a collection. I mean, some people have more than one. They have rifles. They have.
Yeah,
I mean, I know people are hunting. I would even go as far as to say if people who want to go and hunt, for deer or whatever, how did they do it before they had guns? Let's do it that
Mm.
way. See how
yeah.
much deer you will be killing and eating.
Yeah.
So
Do
You know?
you feel in the US, do you feel that there's any sort of pressure? Like here we call it keeping up with the Joneses. Like if someone in your neighborhood has something, you want it. Do
Oh
you
yeah.
know any friends of yours who own guns?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I think my brother even has a gun. He's an ex-Marine, my brother. I'm sure he probably has a gun. I haven't asked. I don't usually want to know if someone has.
Yeah.
don't ask, don't
They
tell.
they have a strange kind of karma to me. Like the irony is, like I remember as a kid, I think they're quite amazing machines, like things that someone could make a gun, like the idea of constructing that and actually just I will admit I was curious. I wanted to shoot a gun. I've always wanted to see what it feels like, just out of curiosity. And I think it was in 2006 or 7, I was on tour with Gwen Stefani, and we were playing in Hawaii, on Honolulu, and we had a day off or a couple of days off, and I was wandering around the streets, and there was a gun place. Like there was someone on the street was handing out a flyer
Mm.
for $60. You can shoot 10 guns. Come
Oh my
upstate, like
god.
one of those shooting
Wow.
ranges where people go to. So if you'd never, just to see. And I thought, okay, now's my chance. So I gave the guy my $60. I went upstairs. They fitted me out with the head things, the headphones, so because it's
Mm.
loud. They put a little apron on me because they said sometimes when you're shooting, the shells fly back on you and they could hit your skin. I had on shorts. It was Hawaii. What are they like? You could burn you.
Goodness.
And all these goggles, the whole thing. And it's like on television. You stand in each little individual. There's other people there. There's like 10 other people in their little slot next to you. The guy comes out. I had 10 guns that I could try, starting with a little rifle and going up to like the Clint Eastwood Make My Day, whatever the big double barrel, like, Colt 45 or what, I'm not sure what it was called. And I mean, I always thought the gun itself is an incredible piece of work. Like
Mm.
the machine, like they're quite pretty
Mm.
in some ways, and I can see the allure to the metal, and it's kind of cold and it's shiny and it's like it's all that. But I just wanted to see what that felt like. Well, I've never done it again, and I did shoot. Like I got up to about 8 guns, and they were so heavy,
Mm.
and the feeling of the tension in my body, like shooting these things, shooting at a target, a paper target, which I
Mm.
actually kept. I have it. I still have the
How
target.
did you
I
do?
did I did pretty good. I hit the bullseye with what they call the police gun, which they call a 9 millimeter, the one with
Right.
the
Yeah.
square cartridge that goes in this. I hit the bullseye with that on the first shot.
And how
Wow.
did you feel when you were
I
firing the gun?
felt,
Was it what you expected?
I felt the first thing I thought was, this is another reason why I'm bringing this up for this topic, was like their fire comes out of these things when you
Mm.
shoot them. Like it's not like on well, I mean, I don't know what it's like on TV. It's not a real gun, I guess, but I'd never really been in proximity of a gun ever, thankfully. Like I might have heard gunshots, but I've never been, I've never been anywhere where I've actually seen anyone or anything get shot. And that scared the shit out of me. I'm sorry. I hope I can say and I felt the first thought was that I almost was in tears. I thought, how could anyone point this at a living thing?
Well, what you've just described about walking, like, it's so unthinkable to a British person that you could walk
Mm.
down a street and be fired for like a gun shooting range, like you would for
Yeah.
Pizza Hut. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
Mm.
yeah, exactly. It was a
just be
guy like with
given
a
these
like a
weapons.
sandwich board, type thing, a little flyer,
Crazy.
10% off, come and try some guns at the shooting range.
Mm.
Yeah.
Obviously to get you people to want to buy guns. I'm sure it's probably I didn't even think of it at the time, but it's probably sponsored by the NRA or some
Mm.
Right.
weapon makers who would get you. But there were people in there that were shooting machine guns, and they had
Oh my God.
So
and when
scary.
the person gives you the gun, you get a round in each gun. They have a safety chain that's like a big metal chain that's attached to the wall in front of you, like below you, and they can lock each gun onto this before you pick it before they hand it to you.
Okay.
So
Oh
they
my
take
God.
it out of a box, they lock it onto the chain, and then the weight of these guns is
Mm.
unbelievable as well. They're
So
very
that's to stop people running off with it.
that's to stop people run and also to stop you being able to pull it away from the window and shoot
Oh,
somebody in the space or shoot the person next to you or like you can only kind of point straight ahead with these guns at your target.
it's
So it's kind of
terrifying.
like a leash on it that
Yeah.
won't go too far, but it's very secure. There's no way you can pull it out. And it was that added to the weight of the guns. And I
Right.
remember the next day I was very sorry. I said to Gwen I had gone to the shooting range. I had never shot a gun before, and I'll never do it again because it did scare
Mm.
the hell out of me. Um, but now I know what it feels like.
Yeah. Yeah.
and
And what did
and
she say?
she said she was like, "Wow, crazy. That's crazy." Whatever. I don't know if she had an opinion about it at all, but I was very sore the next day. Like the tension in my body from like the recoil
Right.
it's
Yeah.
called, which was really, really
Well, I
strong on
guess you're using muscles you don't use.
exactly. And I was kind of paralyzed. I was kind of screwed up for the gig the next day. I felt really bad. I was really in pain. I was like, oh my
So do
God.
you feel any safer in the US with the police carrying guns? Does it make any difference
No,
at
no,
all?
I feel less safe.
Mm.
Yeah.
I would prefer that they could deal with it in another way. And then sometimes I'm surprised, especially here in the US now, we've got all this horrible stuff with the police and the racial thing. And it's just like everything is just, ever since Donald Trump, it just got
Mm.
really escalated. But also, I'm in some ways growing up as a Black person in the United States, I'm kind of it's not surprising. It's not, that suddenly it's this awareness of things, but it's like that's been like that ever since I've been alive, that I can remember living in this country. There's always been racism. It's just kind of got covered up. And I feel like when Donald Trump got into office, he just kind of turned over a rock. And you have a rock in the
Yeah.
ground, there's things living under it, and you turn it over, and you can't ever put it back.
Mm.
And it just all crawled out. It was always there.
Do you feel hopeful now that things are
I
changing?
do. I do. I feel hopeful for younger people, for the
Yeah.
next generation, because if I didn't have that hope, I'd have no hope for humanity at all,
Yeah.
ever at this point, looking at the state of the world and the way grown-ups are behaving all over the world, not just here, but governments and, uh, you know, it, different groups and beliefs of like just so much anger
Mm.
and unacceptance of anyone else other than your own opinions or whatever. But I think young people, I feel like it's going to be their world. Obviously, that's how it works, and I feel like the younger people are just kind of the atmosphere that's been created with access. I get, even though I'm not a huge fan of the internet, I have to admit, but the access to information and how it's just so much more. Young people just seem so much cooler in that sense. They are the ones that are, or so it seems, speaking up and telling grown-ups, hey, it's not cool
Yeah.
to be racist, or it's not cool to do that, or that's, that's bullshit, or, and youth has always done that, really.
Mm.
But I
Yeah.
think now they really have to step up to the plate more than ever before. They got to make sure that their world is better, because, it's going to be them. They'll be the
Mm.
next presidents, and they'll be the next prime ministers, and the next senators, and whatnot. And so and I feel like the young voices that I can see anyway in the U.S. I haven't been that up on international politics lately, but because there's been so much going on here, I'm just like my brain is exploding. But I feel like, when I see the younger people that in our Congress and our Senate, who the new people that have been elected, African American people and Jewish people, and it's so promising, and they are speaking like, like human beings. They're speaking like people with a heart, who are connected to, like, the world, not connected to money or power or any of that. They're connected to being alive.
Mm.
And
Well,
that's good to see. Like, I'm happy when I see that there's some of the younger people that are getting in, and especially into government positions here in the US anyway, are speaking what I feel is truth. They're just speaking to reality.
yeah, and that brings us seamlessly on to your second item for changing the world to make it as it should be, which is about education,
Hmm.
obviously, and feeding into young people's growing minds. And so you would like to make art something that's more important in the education system, so it takes
I
on the same
would.
kind. Yeah, do you want to talk us through that?
Well, I just feel like the creative process, is essential to human beings, to nurture our imaginations, um, and especially, art. Anyway, I'm not in the school system anymore, so I can't really speak to specifics, and maybe I might be speaking out of turn, but I do know that most art or creative programs, especially in the US, in the school systems, are the first things to get cut, the first
Mm,
things to be to say, oh, well, that's an extracurriculum activity. It's not part of the real what's important. And I think that art and music, and other form, engineering, it doesn't have to be like the fine arts. It can be, the process of creativity, and allowing a space and a curriculum, and a conversation, whatever, about being able to use your imagination to create things,
mm,
not just to learn things, but to create in your like to give you that freedom. And I think it's just as important as learning to read and write to me, or to learn how to multiply or count, or
Mhm.
any of
yeah,
the other things. And I think it should always be at that level. It's like math, science, music,
yeah.
painting. To me, they should all be, because I feel like that's the kind of release in the
Mm.
world that we always, we go to it as entertainment or whatever. But it's I speak because I'm an artist. I'm a musician. I, I, I speak from a point of knowing that for me, without having had opportunities, or which I did have when I was young, regardless of being born in Philly in a black neighborhood or schools that weren't so good, we still had music. We did have music when I was a kid. We had art, we had painting, we had drawing, and without those things, I don't know that I could really honestly exist in the world.
I was going to ask you how supported you felt when you were growing up in the education system,
I,
veering towards the arts.
I felt very supported, and then until it's interesting, because it got to a point, when I was in elementary school, I took clarinet lessons. They had a band. I know that schools still have bands and things for the football and whatnot, but it was like it was, it was. I had music teachers. We had little singing groups. We had choir. We had a lot of things that where I looked forward to, and I felt like doing those things made it worth coming to school, and then the rest of it made all the rest of it easy. It was like a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. It
Yeah.
was like I had and I think a lot of kids, if they had that exposure, it would help them with the other things that are maybe not so interesting to them, or the things that seem like more necessities rather than fun. But I felt very supported, and then I got to a point where I really was expanding, like, creatively. Like, I wanted to make films. That's why I went to film school. I got interested in making films, and I got interested in painting, and, like, music led to all of those things. I wanted to write more. There was a time I wanted to just be a writer, but I did get to a level in high school at that point, which was like the last sort of, 3 years of my traditional education, where the schools in my neighborhood were very limited with what they had.
Mm.
And I ended up giving a false address. I can tell this now because it doesn't matter.
They're not going to catch you now.
Yeah, they're not gonna take my high school diploma back now, and if they do, who gives a shit? But I used a false address because I had a family member, like a friend of the family who worked in the suburbs of Philadelphia in a city called Radnor. That's why I ended up going to Radnor High School, which in the late '70s apparently was like one of the top 5 high schools in the country. It was the kids of the sons and daughters of, the CEO of Xerox, and, kids
Oh,
coming to school in a
Mm.
Porsche, and I was sneaking in from the railroad tracks, um, every day, going to school, waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get a train into Radnor, and then kind of sneaking across the lawns, and, making up stories why I'm not on the school bus. And I did that for 3 years
that's
in all
amazing.
kinds of weather,
Wow.
because they had they had a whole TV studio with real, like, cameras that rolled around like on TV. They had an audio visual department, which is where I started getting my film chops together. They had a theater company. I got to do some acting. They had an incredible art studio there. I mean, they had all these things that the inner city schools did not have.
Was there a specific teacher at this school that inspired you?
Well, yeah, my English teacher, and I can see her face now, and I don't know why I can't think of her name. I'd have to look at my high school yearbook. DeCenzo, I think her name was Janet DeCenzo or something like that. I loved my English teacher.
Mm.
I loved writing. I don't read enough. I do like to read, but I don't. I find that I spend more time kind of fiddling around with instruments more than I do, if I have any spare time, than reading. But I loved writing, and I used to get creative writing awards and stuff in school for my little essays or whatever, poems or whatever we used to write.
And did your parents encourage all this? Did they?
Yes, my mother. Well, my father passed away when I was 6, so I was kind of raised with just my mom, and I was the youngest of 5 kids, and I was the surprise baby, if you the surprise. And,
Surprise.
my mother would like to call it the surprise. I say the mistake, but she says, no, no, you were the surprise. God rest her soul. But yeah, so it was, my siblings were all a little older than me, and they were all pretty much out of the house by the time I was about 9 or 10. So my last sort of years were just me and my mom. And my mother was, born in Virginia in 1921. So you can only imagine what she
Mm.
experienced. A lot of things that she never even wanted to share with me. So I don't even know, but I can imagine.
Yeah.
Not very nice things. But so she came from a place where you just, you work, you live, you survive, you work, you have kids, whatever, and then you die. It's like,
Mm.
she wasn't ambitious. She didn't do any, she was a housewife or whatever you call it, a homemaker. But she was a great mother. And she didn't understand what I was doing, but or what I was interested in, like why I was the creative child, and I was like always making up, things and wanting instruments and all that. But she, with her voice, she would say, uh, why aren't you like the other kids, or why don't you go out and play, or why are you always in your room, or why. But then I would say, I need some extra money to get guitar strings, or I need a new typewriter, or I need some cartridges for my Super 8 camera. And she would go, and we were living on Social Security at the time.
Mm.
She would go and ask a neighbor who cleaned houses in the places where I went to high school and get a little extra job, doing, serving some somebody's dinner or whatever, and and get what I needed. And so there was something inside of her that believed, that understood,
Mm.
but then there was also the rational mind of like, well, how can this be possible? How can a little black girl dream that she's ever going to do these things that I used to dream I would do? So she didn't understand it, but at the same time, I feel like she had this whether it was instinctive or just, I don't know, just a mother's love or
Mm.
for their kids. She never denied me things that I needed if she could, if she could help it. So, and then the greatest blessing of all was her being able to come to every single concert I ever went through Philadelphia in my whole life, from
Oh,
Gang of
that's,
Four to
yeah.
Gwen Stefani to Bowie to to Sophie B. Hawkins to to the shittiest little dives I played when I was a teenager. She never missed a show.
That is
Even
That
if,
is
so
even though she
cute.
incredible.
never liked some of the music, she didn't care.
Mm.
So I knew that she was proud of me, like that I had it was worth all the agony of having a different child. A
Did you
troubled.
get any sense of what she would have wanted to do had she had the freedom?
Interesting. No, not really. That's a very good
Mm.
question. I mean, she was happy. She was a very positive person, my mom. I know that was great. She was not racist or anything at all. That was always the irony of Philadelphia, and the school systems as well were very so segregated. It was like, you lived in one neighborhood, and if you went into the other neighborhood, you could be beat up or killed or whatever, called names, or and so it was very, but it usually was the other. It's always it's the other way around. It's like the white neighborhoods would say, okay, you come into our neighborhood, we're gonna stick it to you, and they would. I had many, many encounters, but the opposite was never true, and that's what is it's a real myth. The Black communities are very open and welcoming, and when I had my white friends from my high school who knew where I was coming from, and they were all musicians, they were all the creative people that I met, who are still friends to this day. They would come into West Philly, and my mom would make some food, and we'd hang out, and play some music in the basement, and they'd be like, wow, we thought we go into the hood, and we're gonna get shot, and it's like, well, no, it's like they're like, hey, come on in, let's party. It's so the other way around, and it's amazing how it's portrayed the opposite.
Mm.
Do you know
Mm.
what I mean? That
Yeah.
white people shouldn't come into the Black
I was
neighborhood.
going to
Yeah, yeah,
ask whether you
yeah.
could ever have friends over because you obviously had to keep certain things
Yeah,
secret.
only about three friends. My high school prom guy, Doug Rooney, who was a guitar player. My friend Sean. They would and even at high school, there was, it's interesting that there was the black kids. There was only I think it was like 40 black kids out of 1,100 students.
Wow.
And they made sure we were never in the same class. I never had a class where there was another black person in. It's almost
Really?
like it was and they were very racist, even at the school. The principals, the vice principals, they would make snide remarks. Some of the teachers, you know, and I think they knew. And by like the second or third year, they knew I wasn't really there, but they couldn't nail me really. But they would sometimes make me feel uncomfortable in class and stuff. It was not easy. It was
Mm.
not easy, but I was determined because I was like, you know what? You fuckers have all the good shit, and it's not fair. It's not fair. Every school should have those
Yeah.
things.
Did you
Every
feel
school.
more racism from the teachers or did you feel it from your peers as well?
Oh, both.
Mm.
Both. The classic schools thing where you have, I first arrived and all of a sudden I met all these really cool girls and they were like really good friends. It's like one of those American movies. And then they set you up for something. And then they, it's like
Oh,
like the Mean Girls or what are those
no,
those
really? Yeah.
movies?
Yeah.
There's those cliquey girls
Oh,
and then they take you in their group, and I was like, wow, wow, see, everybody's really nice here. I was totally gullible on my first time at the school, and then with some party or something, they totally stitched me up with some. I don't remember what it was, but I remember it was some horrible prank, and I thought, oh, great. So I'll
So you
just
had to be quite tough.
yeah, yeah, yes, you did. Yeah, and it's weird because and I'm really not a confrontational person. I shy. I have an issue with that. I have a hard time speaking up or, trying to be assertive and but I want I think it's because I really wanted what I wanted, which was to create, which was to make music, to make art, and that was always at the forefront of my mind, which is why, the subject of art in education or whatever comes to mind, because I think everybody has that inkling to that. I mean, everyone is a creator. Everyone, you,
Mm.
me, everyone has the ability to use their imagination and make things, and it's cathartic, and it's just, to me, it's like part of breathing and eating and sleeping and everything it's something that we do, and I think it should be nurtured in at the early stages of life. The opportunities for people to open up that part of them should be a huge priority. In my world, it would be like a big priority, you
Yeah.
know you know what I mean?
So
It's because I think it could create so many nice things if people are fulfilling that side of them. And I
yeah,
think some of the people that are walking around shooting everybody are cut off from that. They'd have
yeah.
to be. They'd have to be.
Yeah. So can we go to your like first moment of picking up a bass at 14? So I think you could already play, you were in bands and you could play guitar and all that sort of
Yeah,
stuff.
let's go
So
guitar.
what happened with your connection with the bass particularly, and can you tell us like where it took you? What were the absolute highlights? What have been the highlights of your career so far, which is
Oh
I
my
know
goodness.
far from over, but taking a
Oh my
hiatus
gosh.
because
Yeah,
of
yeah.
COVID.
Yeah, oh my God, the bass has been it's amazing. I never thought about being a bass player. I just didn't. And guitar is still my favorite instrument, and that was always my dream, to be the next, whatever, to be the next Eric Clapton or whatever. I love the guitar. Um, but like many bass players that I've spoken to now over the years, a lot of us fell into it because no one else wanted to play it.
Yeah.
At that time, it was one of those instruments. Now it's like the coolest instrument in the world. I'm noticing, like, especially with being able to see so many things on internet and Facebook and all those the scrolling things or whatever they are. You see so many people, like women, kids, everybody's got a bass because it's cool.
Girls
And
look cool carrying a
I
bass.
discovered it was cool as hell. Like I know that, I discovered it, by the time I was about 20 at that point. And I was like, okay, this is where I should have been. What was I thinking? But I picked it up at 14 to get a job.
Oh,
That's the
really?
only reason. I wanted to work summer break at school. So I was, it was only in like seventh grade. So I was quite young, obviously 14. And I could already play guitar. I thought kind of well enough to maybe get some work in the sun, like someone would hire me for a band that actually made money, because
Mm.
I didn't know any bands that made money at that point. I just knew that I played with the kids across the street and some people from school, and it was just, we just get together for fun. But my mother was like, "You're 14, you might need to get a summer job, something to make a little extra money." And I thought, well, I don't want to do anything but play music. So how can I, so I went to the local music store. At the time, they used to have a bulletin board with 3x5 cards, index cards, which now we we don't have anything at all like that. And you just go and look on the board, and it was all just people who were posting job, like top 40 band or band for a corporate party or something, something that was, making bands that were making money or bands that weren't making money, but and there was one that said top 40 band seeks bass player. Everybody was a guitar player. Most of the cards said guitarist seeks bassist, guitarist seeks drummer, everybody played the freaking guitar. And I said, oh my God, no one's gonna hire me. And I'm sure they play better than me. So uh, bass was just the next best thing because I knew that it had less strings. I was already playing with a little trio with a couple of boys across the street from me. So there was a boy that played drums and one that played bass, and we rehearsed in my mother's basement. So they would leave their stuff there. sometimes, just hanging out at the house. So when they go home, I would go downstairs in the evening and I'd play a little bit of drums and I'd pick up Ricky's bass. And so I knew I could play the bass, but I just didn't want to be a bass player. And so I said to my mother, I'm going to go on this audition for a bass player. And I don't know who it is, but the phone number is in our neighborhood. You know, back in the day, we used to have these phone numbers that you could
Yeah.
tell which area it was. and and it said, you know, top 40 band, Rolling Stones, Bowie, Queen, you know, with top 40 stuff like that, things that I liked, things I was listening to. I was like, oh, Rolling Stones, yeah, awesome. I can play that, you know. Um, and I went to the audition and it was in the neighborhood. It was not far from my house. It was another black guy, but he was like a total like rock guy, rock punk, like amazing guitar player. His name was Jay Medley. He passed away recently, so terrible. And we've been friends ever since I met him that day. He gave me the job and we worked that summer. And he gave me my first job as a bass player. I said to my mother, if I get the job, can you get me a bass? And she was like, yeah, sure, sure, sure. Because she was like, whatever, you're going to be working at McDonald's, I'm sure of it, you know. And I borrowed a bass from my older sister's best friend's boyfriend. He had a nice bass, like a Rickenbacker, a real proper bass.
Mm.
I went with my best friend's sister, my sister's best friend, to the audition because my mother said, you can't go on your own, which I did, which was true. I wouldn't want to go to a stranger's house at 14 and not know. So she was 18, I think, or 20 at the time. And Jay always used to laugh about the story when I turned up to the house and I had the giant bass case, you know, probably bigger than me. And there was Betty, who was half black and half Japanese. She lived down the street from us. Her father was black and her mother was Japanese. So she was quite exotic looking, you know, she was a very interesting, um, beautiful woman. And Jay thought that she was the bass player. and he was her age, so he was really excited. and then I got down to his basement where we were doing the audition, and then I picked up the bass and he was like, oh no.
That is a brilliant story. Isn't it funny that he was living near you all this time?
Yes, yeah, he was. He's like, I lived on a street called 61st Street, 61st between Race and Vine in Philadelphia. And he lived on 61st and Locust, which is about 8 blocks up the street. All that
Wow.
time. But, you know, I didn't wander around. You don't wander around the neighborhood too much. Kind of stay. Our neighborhoods were very, very close knit. You knew everybody within your sort of 2 or 3 block radius, and you know you spoke to everybody. And hello, Mrs. So and so, and everybody was very polite. And we had a block club, and you know it wasn't what people imagine it is. That's the thing. You know, I think a lot of times the black neighborhoods in the U.S. are blown out of proportion to seem like they're just like this horrible place.
Yeah.
And at that time, they really weren't. They might be now. I don't know.
So how was the audition? What did he ask you to do?
Well, I don't remember exactly, but I know I had to play some songs that were on the radio, and I don't, for some reason I distinctly remember playing Elvin Bishop's song "Fooled Around and Fell in Love." I don't know if you know this song. It was a really big hit at the time, so it was one of the songs that we would have played in the show, and I sang it. I know. We also had to play Boston. More than a feeling.
Oh, classic.
That was number one at the time, so we did that in the show. We played Suffragette City.
Amazing.
Not at the audition, but we did. That was part of one of the songs that we used to do. And I remember when I got the job with Bowie, it was a few years in, because at first I know that when I first started working with Bowie, he was like, we're not playing any of the hits. I'm tired of all that. And I'm bored, but he didn't want to do all the things he had always been doing. So the first period of first few years of working with David, we were doing more alternative stuff. We're doing the drum and bass stuff on Earthling and Outside album and stuff that was a little bit more esoteric and awesome.
And how did you go from Jay Medley's basement to working with David Bowie?
Oh my gosh. With great perseverance and just, I don't know. You know, sometimes I don't even know. It's like I think about it now and I'm like, gosh, A lot of it was being in the right place, I think, at the right time for things for me. And the main thing, I think, the real answer to that question, I would say, is by um, by believing there was absolutely no other alternative. Not to be with David Bowie, but there was no way I was going to live in the world without being a musician, or an artist in some form. But and I just would not let go of that. And with that, it meant uh, whatever decisions I had to make, whatever sacrifices, which there are many. Um, it's not regret, but a sacrifice. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like
Mm.
I'm not going to have kids. I'm not going to allow a relationship to stop me from moving if I need to move. Like things like that. I just knew that I was like, all my energy and attention must go to succeeding and to be able to survive in the world playing music, which I believe is a God-given gift to me because I don't know how I do it. You know, I mean, I've learned things, but it's like a lot of my talent or whatever it is comes. I don't have I've never had music lessons, like other than in school, like on the clarinet. That's not really like, that's not something I go to use today when I'm working on music. In fact, I can't even remember a little how to read the music so well.
Was there ever a point in your career where your confidence was shaken and you thought, I can't do this?
Um, well, no, no, not that I can't do it, but I've had my confidence was shaken at my ability on certain jobs, but was never shaken to think that I can't do it, that I'm not going to get better at this.
Can you give us an example?
Like getting the job with Bowie, which he just called out of the blue. And in my mind, I never it wasn't like an artist that I was on my list, like I must work with. It was, I think Louise Goffin, a good friend of mine, daughter of Carole King, first daughter of Carole King and Jerry Goffin, she was my buddy in London. She was there at the same time
Mm.
as me, and we were the sort of, expatriate, kind of hanging out, making music. We had a band. But Louise says that she remembers me telling her that I wanted to work with David Bowie. But I don't remember that, but I probably did. But who wouldn't?
Yeah,
But in
right.
my but in my mind, he was one of those people like it's like that he was one of those artists that has a special thing attached to the people who play with him. Not all solo artists have that. Frank Zappa is another one. Like if you're in if you come out of Frank Zappa's band, like you must be hot. You're the shit. If you played for David Bowie, like you're wow.
Mm.
I never thought I was in that realm. I knew I was capable and I was getting work and I could do things and I was always getting better. But I just thought I'm not going to be that level. That's a whole nother.
And
uh,
how was it when you started? Was it
Well,
difficult?
that was what I mean. That was when I felt like, oh my God, I don't. When I walked into the first day of rehearsal, I was terrified. And I thought, I hope I make like this is probably going to be the first thing I ever get fired from, or maybe he's going to. Why did he call me? I had all these things in my head, and then I'm there with Carlos Alomar, who was one of those enigmas. Those names on those Bowie records. You think that's the Carlos Alomar who's playing guitar on Fame, and all these things. And then Reeves Gabrelt, like all the other musicians, Mike Garson, it was like this level of musicians that was beyond. And I was like, how do I fit in this? Am I going to make it? I don't know that I can make it. So that was a big moment. The saving grace of that is the man himself, who was incredibly gracious. He knew I was nervous. He was always in good humor. He made you laugh. He made me feel comfortable. He never got weird with me about, sometimes, people can get weird. They can, artists have a bad day, or they're temperamental, or they want a certain thing, and they can kind of, take out their own insecurities sometime on other people around them, like we all do. I'm guilty of that myself. I'm not excluding myself from from my faults. But he made me just relax, and then I just went. I was like, this is the job at hand. Okay, here it is. Okay, that's challenging. Okay, let me work a little harder on Teenage Wildlife, or like some of the songs were like, wow. Because I wasn't a huge Bowie fan in that I knew the catalog. I didn't have his posters on my walls. Queen was my band. I was a Queen fanatic. I
So
love Queen and Freddie Mercury. Oh my God, best band.
on that,
Mhm.
so I read that David challenged you he gave you 2 weeks to learn how to sing the vocal to
That's
Under
right.
Pressure and play the bass line.
That's right.
And you said, I can't do it, I can't do it, and he said, just figure it out.
He just went, "I'll give you 2 weeks," and he
Yeah.
walked out of the room
so
with a little
so
smile
that's
on his face. So that goes to show he had an uncanny, he had many, like, he had more than 6 senses. I think this guy was like, he definitely was from another planet in some ways. But talk about someone being open to their creative channel. You couldn't be more. He was the ultimate conduit for that.
So he challenged you and had confidence that he knew you would be able to nail it.
Exactly, but he kind of can see, I think he could see stuff in musicians. I think that was one of his biggest gifts, that he
Right.
could actually see not only, he could see for himself what people he needed, what kind of person he needed to fulfill his creative, idea. Like,
Mm,
he knew exactly the person who would play the right way or have the right sound. He knew which artist would do just the right, set design, or like he to make his, like, to bring his imagination to life. And that's a skill in itself, let
mm.
alone, so I feel like that was one of his strongest, what I observed in my years of working for him, that was one of his strongest skills, was putting together the right people to who then, because he didn't give you a lot of instruction. It wasn't like, play this and do that, and you kind of get a prompt, a little something thrown out, or he had a little bit of an idea. But as time went on, I could see in his head that he knew what that idea was going to sound like when it was finished. But he just kind of would throw like a little seed out, and the rest of the people in the band, or whoever was working on any of the projects, from the lighting all the way through, just knew, they just did what they did, and then it turned out Bowie. You know what I mean? Like, he and so he left us to our own personalities and devices, and let us use our own imagination to see how we could fulfill his little mission, in a sense.
Mm. Was there anything about him that surprised you, or anything about his process that you weren't expecting, and that you enjoyed, or that you didn't enjoy and that you can dish the dirt on?
Um, no, I have to say I enjoyed everything about working
Yeah.
with him. It's not hardly anything I didn't enjoy. It was such a thrill to go to work every day. He Well, he was funny. I didn't think of him, I never thought of him as being, weird or anything, because I think people get that, all his different characters and personas over the years, and, wearing dresses and all the different things he did way before anybody else did them. Um, but he was a funny guy. Like, I never imagined him quite, he was humorous. He had that real British humor, and he was funny. And that kind of surprised me, how funny he was.
It gets you a long way as well, being funny. Do you know what I mean? It brings people
Yeah,
along with you. Yeah.
well, exactly, and also how gracious he was. And the only times I ever saw him, be, sort of like, "Okay, I'm a star, get away, fuck off," like that,
Mm,
was on a rare occasion, and it would be a day he's just having a bad day. Like,
mm,
something was going on, or he just was tired, or he didn't wanna be bothered, but it took a lot for that to come out, a lot.
right,
I mean,
right.
I wasn't around him 24 hours a day, but most of the time I spent with him, if people came in, even if I brought my family in, or after a show, or someone wants to meet you or get an autograph, he was always kind and gracious and respectful of anyone at all times. And I thought that says a lot,
Yeah,
that says a lot.
it really does.
That does actually bring me on to the next question, because you said your third way that you would change the world is make time for meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wonder whether the stress of touring and, how did you manage to relax and wind down? Because it must have been really full on. And why would you make meditation a part of our everyday lives?
Well, I think of that now because I feel like meditation, I feel like there should be like a mandatory amount of time that the entire world, this is definitely like a science fiction dream or whatever, but that everyone should take there would be a certain time of day when the whole world just stops what they're doing and just is still. And the only reason I say it now, I mean, for me, I'm not like a Buddhist or anything, and if I were interested in being any religion, it would probably be that. And I do read about it, and I do, I try and practice a little bit sometimes, not as much as I should, like in terms of meditating or being still, doing yoga, taking care of my body, etc. Eating well, very important. But I mean, my meditation is being on stage. 100%. Like I can sit forever with my thoughts like everybody else. When you meditate, they never go away. You sort of try and just bring yourself back to where you are, just sitting where you are in your space and being aware of where you are and what's around you, and aware of your body, what's happening in your body. But when I'm on stage, when I get the opportunity to go on stage for 30 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours, an hour and a half, however long that performance is, to me, that is the moment when I am completely that is my meditation. I'm engaged in channeling that music, and nothing else is in my brain. And I feel free, and I feel refueled and alive. And that's when I feel alive. Like that, which is why I think I've spent more of my time as a touring artist. Haven't done a ton of records with people. Some musicians love to be in the studio all the time. I enjoy that. But I would much rather be doing a concert every night, because that's the moment I get to be free.
So it must have been pretty difficult for you the last year.
Oh, it's been horrific. It's been the worst year, one of the worst years of my life. I never imagined that I would not be able to do that, because I feel like I'm not getting my time, which is why I thought of the meditation, because this is what I've been going to try and get through all this, is trying to just make sure I'm still for a few minutes every day and just breathe and try and get energy from the world, from nature. I've got little squirrels and birds in my backyard here, and it's like they've kept me going. I mean, really, it's like I sit and I focus on them, and I feed them peanuts and I watch them eat.
You never get stage fright, does it? Do you never get that paralysis that some people have?
Not paralysis, but I'm always nervous before a show. People say,
That's
"Oh,
good.
how can you be nervous?" I'm like, I don't care what it is, how many times I've done it. Like the first, 20 minutes before those lights go down, my stomach's like, oh my God, because, and then it just takes the first note, like the first bomb downbeat, and the lights go up, and then I'm in that zone. And it's like I'm in another world, and I'm doing what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing, which is creating something. What I mean? It goes all the way back to that again. It's like it's such a liberating feeling, and that's my energy and my fuel and my positive. Like everything is wrapped up in making that music happen, and listening to the other players, and the response of the audience, and seeing the faces and feeling, the connection between my fingers. Sometimes I'm thinking, here are my fingers on these strings. As I do this note, this sound comes out, and that sound is making those people dance and move and jump. And, it's like, wow,
Such a
what
feeling.
an
What a buzz.
incredible connection to humanity. That's why music is important.
Yeah.
Whether I'm playing or listening, it's a communication that we mustn't lose,
And it's
especially
something that people
especially
need.
in a live sense. I mean, Zooming and whatever is fine, but it's not the same.
Yeah, I
It's not.
totally agree.
It cannot be a substitute. There is no substitute for that.
So, it sounds like you've got your Zen sorted. But have you ever had a real like fangirl moment? I remember I met Clem Burke once backstage after a Blondie gig,
Mm,
and I
mm.
made a complete Ooh. I was introduced to him and he put his arm around me for a photo and I just basically wouldn't let go of him. And he was so kind. And I just didn't want to let go, and I realized it was inappropriate. But anyway, have you ever had moments, possibly not like that, where you're physically assaulting someone, but where you fangirled at someone because you just, your work has taken you to somewhere you never thought you'd get to?
Um, I had a moment once with Michael Hutchence from In Excess.
Oh, who wouldn't?
I just thought he was the sexiest
Oh my
guy
God.
ever. Like to me, he was the new Mick Jagger. He was like he was just so, oh my God, he was hot.
I've seen In Excess, and my God, he was like sex on legs on the
He was
stage.
sexy, right?
Yeah.
And I'm bi, like I'm pretty much more the other way, but not for him.
If anyone's going to take you to the other team.
Yeah, Michael wouldn't have a problem. But God rest him, God, it broke my heart. Oh, it broke my heart when he left. But I had a moment with him. Funny enough, I worked with Andy Gill from Gang of Four, another one who's left us way too soon. Andy and Michael were good friends, and Andy was producing a solo record for Michael when Michael passed away. And I was meant to play on that record. Michael was a fan of mine, which freaked me out. Because one day I was doing a festival with Bowie. I don't even remember where it was, but I remember that sort of the summer European festival with the tents in the back and all the sort of muddy walkways and whatnot. And Michael Hutchence was there. And I was like, oh my God, Michael Hutchence is, I guess, in Excess were playing, or maybe he was hanging out. I can't remember why he was there. And at one point I was standing outside the dressing room tent, and I was speaking with Michael Hutchence, and he was telling me about this solo record with Andy, and he was like, I would love you to play on it and everything.
Wow.
And Bowie comes out. Bowie comes out of the dressing room, and I'm talking to Michael Hutchence.
It's like a dream.
It was a dream. This was my moment. Like, even though I didn't really fancy Bowie or whatever, but this was hilarious because I'm standing there, and there's Bowie on one side and Michael Hutchence on the other. And I remember like standing, and we're all kind of, they were talking, and I'm standing, and I'm like, this is freak. I'm like, this can't be happening. And then Michael says, I was just talking to Gail about playing on my solo record. And then I remember David taking my arm, like one arm, and he was like, oh no, you don't, you're not taking my Gail. And then Michael sort of taking the other arm, and he was like, well, she can make up her own. And I had these two guys, and I was freaking out.
It's
like a cross between an anxiety dream and a sex dream. I
don't
know.
Exactly. Literally just the best dream ever.
It was. I have to say, my memory isn't so great with a lot of details, but I will never forget that. I remember like going like to my hotel or whatever later going, I had Michael Hutchence and David Bowie like fighting over me. And
oh my God. So many people are going to be listening to this thinking, did you get a selfie?
Oh, that was before selfies.
Right. Can you imagine now?
I didn't even own a cell phone then. Yeah. This would have been like 97 or something like that.
What an incredible memory.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you've made us all really want to go to a gig now. And what are your future plans? Are you going to be back in the studio? Are you aiming to go back on the road?
Well, I'm going to start working on some new material, and I'm going to start releasing one at a time, because I've been saying I'm going to do a new album forever. And it's just practically getting all that together, especially now, is just too much to think of, but it's not too much to think of doing one thing at a time. That's where I'm trying to just, with everything right now, with the uncertainty of everything, it's just one day at a time. What can I do today? What's in front of me? And what I really want, I do have goals, and my goal is to actually get an album's worth of material together, at least by the end of the year. But I'm going to start working on recording some new songs now for myself. I think eventually I'm going to be in Paris most of the time. That is my goal.
How's your French?
Getting better. Getting better, but not good enough yet. You can never be good enough for the French, can you?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not getting into that, but you're right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
What is your favorite thing to do in Paris, Gail, when you're there?
To do the cliche thing, to sit in a really nice cafe outside on a nice day and take your time and maybe jot a little journaling, to eat some nice food, and to walk on a nice day. I love walking through Paris.
That's a lovely place to picture you for the end of this podcast. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
you're very welcome.
It's
You're
been
so
a pleasure talking to you.
It has been a
likewise,
total pleasure, yeah.
likewise, likewise.
Thank you so much for listening to The World as It Should Be. We hope it inspires you to work towards shaping the world as you think it should be. You can find out more about Prima Donna Festival by going to primadonnafestival.com. If you enjoyed the episode, please give us 5 stars on iTunes and leave us a review. Tell your friends about us. We're on Spotify too and all good platforms.
The World as It Should Be from Prima Donna.